Thinking about buying an EV, but worried about the range? Get educated on EV range so you know the facts to make the best decision for you. Please subscribe and like this video by clicking on the buttons below. Understanding EV range. Every EV has an EPA rating of the range you can expect. This is just as in an ICE vehicle, but your mileage may vary, so the saying goes, and that's the same for an EV. Now, unlike a gas vehicle in which you can fill up your tank every time you go to the gas station, the EV you buy may not recommend you fully charging up to 100% all the time. It actually depends on the battery chemistry of your EV. If your vehicle has a lithium iron phosphate or LFP battery, it can be regularly charged up to or at 100%. If your EV has what's called a lithium ion battery, which is also a ternary lithium ion battery, it is recommended to limit charging to 80% on a daily basis, and only up to 100% when you start a road trip or you go on a long distance. Knowing this information, now you can determine the actual range of the EV that you need. If the EV uses an LFP battery, then your range estimate will be basically the EPA number or a bit less. If your EV has a ternary lithium ion battery, then you multiply the EPA range by 0.8 or 80%. So a 300 range mile vehicle is more like 240 on a daily basis. If you live in a very cold climate where the temperatures are at or below freezing, your EV range will be reduced further in those conditions. You may have to reduce your range up to 25%. So our 240 mile range example is now 180 miles on a daily basis. Lastly, as the battery in your EV ages, it will lose some of its charge. This will result in further decline of your range. A typical battery will lose about 6% of its range after 4 years. The rate of decline slows after a year or two, and this is actually really the first years where you lose most of your capacity. Let's talk about typical driving distances. Now, before we continue, knowing where and how you will charge makes a big difference. I previously recorded a video on everything you need to know about charging, and I'll put a link in the comments below if you want to check that out. Let's assume you live somewhere where you have access to charging most every day or night. Our hypothetical range of 180 or 240 miles may be far more than you need. Data shows that the average daily distance driven in the US is about 40 miles. If you have this length of commute or you drive a similar distance, you can see that you'll not even have to charge every day. You could actually go a few days between charging. Taking road trips. Going on a long road trip is often a major concern regarding EV range, and rightfully so. Just before you go on a trip, you can charge your vehicle up to 100%. This will give you the longest range possible. When you drive on the highway, the faster you drive, the less range you will observe. In general, you want to drive at 70 miles per hour or thereabouts. If you go much faster, your vehicle will have to use much more energy to overcome the resistance of airflow. Here are some example tests done on various EVs, and it compares their EVA range to a highway test at 70 miles an hour. Each EV is different, but it's safe to assume you will lose up to 25% range for extended highway driving. This means our 300 mile range EV is now only 225 mile road trip vehicle if you drive faster. Let's say you are going to make a trip in which each direction will be 180 miles. You'll be able to arrive without charging, but you will need to charge before you return home. This will require you to charge overnight on a level 2 charger at your destination if you're staying overnight, or you'll have to charge at a DC level 3 fast charging station. You can check out my charging video on how to find all of these charging locations. Depending on the rate of charge of your vehicle and the DC charging station or supercharger, this will take about 20 minutes to an hour to charge. Again, I mentioned this in my charging video. if you take frequently long trips, I strongly encourage you to look at EVs with the ability to charge at least 150 kilowatts or higher. Let's talk about other factors. The daily driving distance in road trips should cover the majority of scenarios to help you calculate the minimum range you need in an EV. But you may have some other concerns where you desire more range. For example, you can only charge infrequently, or you're worried about losing power for an extended period of time. Or maybe you are concerned you'll be stuck in a huge snowstorm for a long time, or you have to evacuate in an emergency. These corner cases may push you to want additional range, and that's okay. Extending range. The majority of EVs are optimized to provide the best range possible at a specific price point. However, there are some things you can do to extend the range of your EV. None of these are going to double your range, but you could see an improvement from like 5 to about 20%. These include accelerating smoothly and driving at slower speeds. The slower the speed, the less energy required to push the EV through the air. Make sure that regen is on the highest setting. By regen, we mean regenerative braking. This is usually a setting in the vehicle, and what it does is charge the battery when you take your foot off the accelerator or you brake. You can also buy smaller wheels and or lighter wheels. The lighter wheels require less energy to turn, and this results in additional range. See an article that I'll link to below in the description about further details on extending range.
All right, let's recap our EV range video discussion. So the first thing is you want to determine your daily driving distance. In other words, the average is about 40 miles, but yours may be a little bit more than that depending on your commute and so on. Next thing you want to do is check the distance for any road trips that you take. Where are the places to charge, whether it's an overnight charger or a level 3 station. Make sure you know how far you need to go between your ability to charge. And after that, you're going to need to take into account those corner cases that we mentioned, such as inclement weather and so on. Once you have this information, you really have a good idea of, okay, this is the minimum kind of range that you need. And once you have that, you then can determine, all right, does the EV I'm looking at have a ternary lithium-ion battery or an LFP? If it's a ternary battery, then you need to remember your daily number is going to be 80% of whatever the range is, and the LFP, where it's more like 100. So with this, you have a great education on understanding what to look for in terms of range for an EV.
Thank you for watching this video. If you found the content interesting, please click the like button and subscribe. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, please put them in the comments.